because we just start and there we are.
I know, right? All right. So back into it, day two.
Yes,
So how
yes.
many classes did you teach today?
I had two classes today. Our intro class and then a second semester class.
Okay.
So the intro class I was doing as a blended model anyway, half
Yep.
time in the classroom, and then kind of open lab, like you had to get stuff done, and I didn't care when you did it, just come to lab and make it happen.
Yep.
So uh, that class, and then as our intro class, and then a layout and design class, which focuses on Adobe InDesign specifically, laying
Okay.
out page layouts. And really what I've done here for that class specifically to kind of, can you hear the elephants?
Yeah.
Yes. Um, Somebody's angry. That's what that is.
That's
Um,
right.
uh, I've come, I've combined everything, a business card, menu, brand assets that we would kind of maybe develop individually to kind of get a little bit different exposure into different styles. I've just combined everything into you're going to create brand assets for a restaurant.
Oh, nice.
So it's all, again, it's still an intro level course. Um, and we are going to go methodically, painstakingly slow through the design process over the next 7 weeks with sketching, mock-ups, getting feedback, the entirety of even testing with some people. I think that's one of the things we can leverage right now is, things aren't actually. It's hard right now because I know people are sitting at home trying to print stuff, like they're getting email packets. But I'm even thinking like, here, pull up we're going to design the menu. We're going to pull it up on the phone, and you're actually going to have somebody in your house try to find or try to place their order by using
Right.
the menu on the phone, stuff like that.
Yep.
Just to really think about, reinforce the design process, but also thinking about users. So,
Yeah, that's
uh,
cool. So how do you balance the like have you already gone through kind of which buttons to push in InDesign earlier in the semester?
yes, yeah. Um, and it'll probably end up being a version of what I've done with my web page development class. I'm probably going to go through and record uh, a handful of short videos just on the specific tools I need you to use in the moment.
Yep.
Because here's 100 tools. Dear God, you only need five of them.
Right.
And
Well,
again,
and that's a
because
great example of when to use a pre-recorded, YouTube video versus a Zoom session, right? I mean,
yeah,
you, you don't you,
100%.
you don't want to go through all those menus live in front of people. They'll that's really not engaging.
Well, in
You want to
part,
discuss, right? Is
yeah,
you part of the Zoom thing,
yeah. If you're attending a college class, so somebody can show you what buttons to push in anything, what are you doing? I
right?
mean, we need to talk about the why and
Right.
things like that and that's why I'll actually, now that I rethink it, I'm probably not going to record a lot of the individual videos. I might record one general one and then
Yep.
push them to the Adobe help X or help at adobe.com. I don't know what the
Yep.
actual URL is off the top of my head, but you know, Adobe changes constantly.
Yep.
Software is changing constantly right now. So the tutorial you do today, outdated tomorrow, because just like everything else, you're going to have to, as a professional, you're going to have to be able to figure stuff out. Here's the place where you're going to go and figure stuff out.
Right. So you can point them at those five tools that they need. Hey, this is
Yeah.
how I'm going to constrain you. Use these five things.
Yep.
And here's the URL to Adobe and figure those five things out. And then we're going to talk about the design process. We just happen to be using InDesign. Right. But the
100%.
design
Right.
process is universal. Right. And that's great.
It's like teaching a specific IDE. What are you
Yeah.
doing? I
Right.
mean, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. That's good.
And I was surprised when I actually wasn't surprised, because we use Slack after class. That's how we continue to engage each other. The students actually saying, "Hey, I missed you guys," and I thought that was freaking amazing. Like, granted, now we're all isolated, so we kind of miss everybody, but like, that time up front of socializing the learners to be comfortable together goes a long way. A
Right.
long way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super important, and I know, you and I have talked about this even in a work environment, and I think the work environment and the classroom environment, similar kind of requirements, right? If I'm working with somebody remotely and I've never really met them, and it's just over email or phone call, and they do something that maybe I'm just like, well, geez, why did they do that? If I haven't met them before, I haven't like maybe sat down and had lunch, met them at their office or whatever. It's really easy to just say, oh man, what a jerk, or this person doesn't know what they're doing, or whatever. But you
Yeah.
socialize, right? And you get to meet somebody and you know them. It's like, oh, well, that was really weird. I know Mike must have had a good reason for it. Let me ping him, right? Once
Yeah.
we know each
100%.
other, it's a lot easier to give the benefit of the doubt, right?
I mean, I can use a specific example, without naming names, but a company you and I both used to work for when we were doing some online stuff, and we had a teaching assistant who refused to show their face in a webcam, right? And
Right.
was strictly business in interactions with the student. And you bump up into two hard-headed, stubborn people together online, it's usually it turns into a mess, right?
It does.
Um, and I got into a chat with that learner, and I don't think I had the webcam on. Maybe I didn't, but he could hear the dog and the kids and everything. And he specifically, I'm paraphrasing here, but said, "Yeah, I can't yell at you. You're just a guy with a family." And I'm like, "Yes, we all kind of treat everybody like that."
Right.
But
Exactly.
it's so easy in the digital age just to treat people on the other line as utility in the way of us trying to make something happen, and we don't get exactly what we want. We rant and rave at customer service and yada yada. So
Right. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, even as we go past this period of time where everything has to be online and you move into a world where you want it to be online, or, it needs to be online for other reasons, somehow socialization is really important, whether it's, the Zoom, Brady Bunch, everybody's up there sharing kind of
yep.
thing, or it's or maybe it's when you can, everybody does come into the classroom at the beginning of the semester and just actually meets each other, and then kind of moves on. So
Yeah,
I
it's interesting because today, again, my class of 11 people, or 11, I think it was 11, um, everybody showed up and had their webcams turned on.
Yep.
Now, my other class, which is just a first semester class, a third of the population didn't have the cam turned on because I don't think that they're fully comfortable yet, or
Right.
who knows why. But I mean, I
Right.
was really impressed that 100% showed their faces.
Right. That's cool. I saw, again, just kind of because it's all about shared experience, right? And that's one of the big things about socialization. I was listening to the radio last night, and some DJ had this massive house party on Instagram yesterday. I don't know. Did you read about this?
Uh-uh.
So this massive house party. So it was like this 11-hour house party, dance party. Everybody show up on Instagram live and do this. And it was really crazy because all these people showed up, thousands of people. And then Mark Zuckerberg showed up. And then, and a bunch of celebrities, right, showed up. And then like the whole thing stopped because the guy that was hosting it, Michelle Obama, showed up. And the guy was like, oh my God, Michelle Obama's here, and like the whole thing stopped. But Michelle Obama wasn't actually at his house, but
Right.
everybody had this shared experience where, Mark Zuckerberg and Michelle Obama stopped by this virtual party, and there was this shared experience. So it's interesting, right?
Well, as another example is pre, what's going on right now, was our interaction with celebrities and sports figures through social media.
Right.
We're connected now to people that we've never been able to connect with before,
Right.
and what I'm hoping out of this comes a little bit more consideration for the people on the other side
Right.
of the wire.
Right.
That's probably me dreaming, but yeah, like who'd have thought, like potentially, Barack Obama could show up in this thing if he hears about In the Trenches and wants to talk about learning. He
Right.
could, we make that public and he shows up.
Yeah. It's cool. It's cool stuff. And it's just different shared experiences with, different technologies. So that's
Yeah,
cool. So how did the other instructors make it through day 2 today?
I don't know. Um, no news is good news, I guess.
Yeah.
The questions that are coming to me about Zoom are like how to record things or how to share things after the fact, which, but everybody that is using Zoom for synchronous sessions seems to be really happy with it. Both the faculty and the students.
Good. That's great.
Yeah, I think, to go off our conversation from last time, if you do it right, it can provide similar value to a face-to-face experience.
Right. I agree. I agree. Well, cool. So, yeah, so I mean, it's good news, right? 2 days in and no like complete huge course corrections, right?
Yeah, and I really have to, this boils down to a couple things, right? The size of our institution. We're a community college. We're supposed to be able to innovate and be a little bit more nimble than your 4 years. I
Yep.
can't even imagine what those places are trying to do with all of their everythings. I do. Friend of mine, IT, a part of IT, director of IT, I think for nursing program at Vanderbilt. I'm going to
Yep.
have a conversation with him later
Oh,
this
cool.
week, and I might fill you in. Actually, maybe invite you into that to see how they're dealing with some stuff.
That would be
Um,
cool.
but like the size of our school, how hardcore our IT department is with not just hiring people to do stuff, but like actually learning how to do things. Like we've
Right.
built our own servers. I mean, we've done all kinds of. I mean, our director of IT like runs a really, really, really good ship. So like, we are fully deployed remote delivery in a week
That's
from
good.
from having no even inkling that was going to be a thing, right? Um, so I'm really impressed that the questions and the things that we're getting again are I wouldn't call them trivial, but they're not like, oh dear God, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? They're
Right.
actually,
Right.
people are actively trying to use the technology in ways that it's meant to be used. Prior to this, faculty would just post office hours on their door,
Right.
um, and now faculty are including links to the Google appointment calendar because they're using the appointment slots feature in Google
Nice.
Calendar for bookable things. So like
Nice.
maximizing the tools that we already have in place versus actually adding anything new. The only new
Right.
tool that we've added has been Zoom. Everything else is just better use of pre-existing tools.
Awesome.
Um,
Awesome. So, a question I had for you, because I was asking I have one child in high school. What have you heard from your school district about what's going to happen after this? Ohio puts this, 3 week pause thing on, right? Kind of, with schools. What have you heard from your school district that they're going to be doing here in the upcoming weeks?
in all honesty, I have no clue
Me
because
either. I'm in the same boat.
yeah.
I haven't
Um,
heard a thing.
I'm not paying attention only because my wife she's watching DeWine every day. She
Yep.
gets all the emails, the division of labor, right? I'm focusing on trying to make college remote
Yep.
learning a little bit better. She's really dialed in with the kids, and obviously we're fortunate because she's been staying at home for a while, and our kids are at those ages where they're relatively self-sufficient, right? The teenager does what she needs to do, although she's going a little stir crazy. For these extrovert teenagers right now, this really sucks for them. Really
Yep.
sucks.
Yep. Now,
Um,
and what grade levels are your kids in? So my son's a junior.
my daughter is 15, so what does that make her? Sophomore ish, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, yeah, because she started. Yeah, yep. And then 8 and 4. So um, for my 8-year-old, it's really just like summers. It's spring break still, kind of, sort of.
Yep. Yep.
And my son, he don't care. He's
Right.
he's he's probably on the roof right now. Who knows what he's doing?
Right. Well, it's interesting because they have some, I have coworkers from a few different states, right? Our whole team is remote, and
Right.
there's other states that their kids are full on Google Classroom. They got lesson plans. They got stuff they have to do, and I really feel like and I think overall Ohio's response to this whole thing has been brilliant. but I just have not heard anything from the schools. And again, I might not be in the right channels. I might not be paying attention to the right things, but it feels like we're a little behind.
So it's different, right? Each superintendent and principal is handling this different.
Yep.
I know my daughter, my 8-year-old, is getting emails from home. A lot of their stuff is even integrated already, right? To be pseudo remote because they got Class Dojo and all these other things that and Google Classroom that they're accessing stuff with. But I know, especially out where we are, Northwest Ohio, some schools, because of the lack of internet for some of our people, are just kind of like, we can't do anything.
Right. And I suspect that might be a little bit in our district. I mean, there's certainly a portion of the population in our district that does have internet. Everything's fine, but there's going to be a significant portion of our population that has sketchy or no internet. And so then at that point, right, it becomes an equity issue. And so what can you do? You can't just teach the people on the right side of the digital divide, right?
Yeah.
So we had heard some things that, and of course my son's 17, so he's going to tell me what he wants to tell me. But he's like, oh yeah, I just think they're going to do enhancement materials and it's not really going to be for a grade, blah, blah, blah. But on the other hand, if they can't teach it, I mean, you can't leave half the kids behind. So maybe that is true. I don't know. So I need to dig in and get some more info on how they're going to do that, because, and that is the equity issue and the digital divide issue is a huge thing here, right? We take for granted because we work, you work in a community college environment. I work in a corporate environment. Well, of course, everybody has connectivity, right? Because that's the world we live in, but that's not the real world, right? There's a significant portion of the population that doesn't have that. So as we move to more blended modalities and stuff, how do we address that? That's a big problem. We probably don't solve that, but.
Well, so one of the things, and I can't remember what we talked about because I'm talking to everybody all day, every day anymore, is, libraries and other places like that are closed, still keeping their internet on so people could drive into the parking lot. I mean, I've actually made the suggestion at our college that we, when, and I don't even want to say normal, like when we start to get back to a face-to-face style of teaching, like we got to really rethink a lot of everything. Specifically, like why don't we have an outside space to do classes in?
Right.
Why is that not an option? I would be comfortable doing an outside class right now, or, maybe the weather gets make sure there's heaters, but you know what I'm saying? Like, like I think that there's ways to do this. But I think that we're all just within education, we're so stuck into a routine of how we've done things forever that it's so, you don't even think that there might be a different way, even though you have a conversation with some people and start brainstorming and just kicking things around, like being crazy with some ideas.
Right.
Hey, son. Lots of interesting things. Like I was talking to our nursing our phlebotomy people. I can't remember if I told you this or not, so sorry if I'm repeating myself. But they were looking about how they could actually have students at home testing, drawing blood.
Yep. And you hadn't mentioned that. So how are they doing it?
Get a syringe and some ketchup packets.
Oh.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like if it's just, and I don't know exactly what they're trying to teach as part of it, right? Other than with medical, a lot of stuff is competency based, right? So it's there's some level of a routine there. You take somebody's arm and gaff tape, or not gaff tape, but the medical tape, a packet to it, and then just treat it like.
Yeah.
And I think there's creative ways to do things, but what happens is we get so locked into just like what we've done before, and this is what we're going to do, and this is what the state is telling us to do, or the accrediting body is telling us to do, that any creative thinking just gets pushed down. All of the creative thinking that we had as kids.
Yep. Just gets beaten out of us.
Yeah, exactly. So this is, and again, another reason I'm kind of excited about this right now is because it's forcing us to get a little bit creative with how we're doing things.
Right.
So,
agreed.
Which brings us to the thing I wanted to talk about tonight was this idea of responsive learning experience design.
Right.
Um, and not even using the word responsive learning design, because I did a Google search and I think I shared with you, it's a lot about responsive web design being
Right.
used in kind of content design. But what I'm talking about, like with responsive learning design, is this idea of we're able to respond to almost any challenge, different variable that we have within the education system, whether it's learner intent. Am I here because it's required? Am I here because I kind of sort of like this? Or am I here because this is my jam and I want to know everything and everything about it, right? Like,
Right.
how do we serve those three different groups, which we have in our classes all the time?
Yep.
How do we make something responsive so it could be something I'm going to take in a competency model versus a traditional model, boot camp model, 8-week model, 16-week model? I mean,
Yep.
like,
Right.
how do we design learning experiences that if we have to flip the switch and go remote, we could do that, because it's
and I think and also being responsive, you know, to the instructor, right, too, you know, especially if it's a curriculum.
100%.
You know, is it this instructor's, you know, main thing and what they love? Is it a class that they have to teach? Is it adjunct? Is it, what's the, how do you respond to the different people teaching, as well as the different intents of the learners? So, and modality is huge, right?
Yeah, I mean, just the different level of the instructor. Adjuncts, no offense, I used to be an adjunct. You don't get paid enough to I don't know how to say this. You just don't get paid enough.
You don't get paid enough, right?
What it boils down to, right? I mean, I even know right now, I'm hearing stories. Some adjuncts are just like, I'm just here's the course material. I'm going to walk away because I don't want to screw it up. I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
That's just, like, unfortunately, the nature of the beast. But I think supporting those people, adjuncts, who may or may not have as much understanding of pedagogy, of the intent of the actual course designer, I think if we build out some materials to support them as part of a responsive learning experience design, right, responding to the experience level or background, whatever we want to call it, of the instructor, that's going to solve one of the problems that I know academia has all over the place, and that's consistency of courses.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, different sections, same subject or same class, but totally different experiences.
Right. Absolutely.
So how do we how do we start to design that, is kind of where I think this is inevitably going to lead for you and I, because that's kind of everything that we're working up to, is like something, creating content costs money. Being able to maximize the distribution of that content is really the only way, I think, or that coupled with training faculty is really the only way that education, great education, actually scales.
Yeah, agreed. And, another use case for that, not only the adjunct, but the, even just kind of moving into, the high school realm, but it could also be at the community college level, somebody that wants to incorporate something that's not quite in their wheelhouse, but it's gonna be really beneficial. It's adjacent to what their wheelhouse is, but it's really beneficial. But so for example, bringing in some STEM subjects into another class, or just wanting to teach a STEM class in high school because there's nothing there. Again, having that guidance, right, and that consistency, and just kind of that, here's the philosophy behind this, and being able to meet that a really enthusiastic and willing good teacher that doesn't have experience in that particular field.
And I think the place you're going to get the most bang for your buck there, right, is going to be in teaching software skills.
Yeah,
because you're
right.
not going to get a software developer to teach kindergarten.
Exactly. You're not going to do it. So being able to put those in there and have somebody that's a good teacher of whatever, English or history, able to do that is you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck there.
and I guess if we think about it, right, if we go back to just programming concepts, right, loops, if statements, all those things, whatever, conditionals, blah, 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 no matter what age you are, they're the same.
Yep.
Whether I'm 5, 10, 25, 80. But
right.
So in my mind, some of the responsiveness of the design, of the learning experience design, would also go into like the problems that you have them solve with those things, right?
Right. Yep.
Like a professional would probably want something a little bit more applicable to a professional scenario,
Right.
where a 5-year-old would just want to be able to sort jelly beans by color.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
so it's a lot of work, but I think it's the only real way that you scale great education. And you and I both know, no matter what the intent is, at the end of the day, people are going to want it to scale.
Right. They are. Absolutely. That's
unless you're going to run it
inevitably leads.
And unless you're going to run a charity, it's going to scale, or somebody's going to want it to scale. Somebody that's paying for it is going to want it to scale.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of rich. There's a lot of rich subject matter here. I mean, because that responsiveness has to go in so many directions. And we also talked about this, right? In the way that you build, this kind of gets back to the way that you build good software. I think building good curriculum, there's a lot of analogies that work. But one of the things is making sure whatever modules you have are loosely coupled to the other modules in a course.
Yeah.
Right. And so that raw material, I can take this module and I can put it into a different setting, into a different course. And then you don't build the connective tissue into the module. You overlay the connective tissue on top. And again, you can be responsive. What's the intent, right? So what's the intent of the course that this module is in? And we can decide how deep you go, how it relates to other modules, but it's an overlay, not an embedded thing, right? Because otherwise you just can't reuse that material anywhere, because it's just all tangled up and tightly coupled with all the stuff that's around it. And that just doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean, this really goes into thinking about learning as I think I remember I told you, like the term PIPs. You know what a PIP is? A PIP is actually a thing, like Hershey's bar.
Okay.
That breaks off into pieces.
Oh yeah.
Those are PIPs, right?
Okay. Yep.
So they're each self-contained bars, but like put together, they can be part of a bigger thing, right? I think what we're looking at really doing is, and then it's the wrapper that binds all them together.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
That's what we're really talking about, is like being able to design content so it's repurposable as part of its responsiveness in whatever package that you want to put it in.
Right.
Because we've done this before, when it comes to redesign. Anytime you've got a lesson that starts out in the last lesson or two lessons ago, you're just kind of like, man, that doesn't really hold, or that I don't want to say it holds up, but that causes issues when it comes time.
Well, it causes issues when it's embedded, right? I mean, that can be part of the guidance, right, of that connective tissue, and the guidance to the instructor is in this particular course. We did talk about this thing previously, but it's not actually in the material. Yeah. And I think you got to replace that, right, with we did this in a couple of the recent courses that we've designed. Is you make assumptions. What are the base level skills that you need to come into this lesson? We're going to assume that X, Y, and Z. I don't know where you got X, Y, and Z. Right. It might have been the previous lesson, or it might have been work experience. Who knows? But if you're going to understand what we're going to talk about here, you have to understand X, Y, and Z, because we're going to assume you know it, and we're not going to qualify that, right?
Yeah, because if those assumptions end up being part of the syllabus or whatever you would use for that, then that's a contract with the learner. And if they're willing to forego those assumptions, well, then how did you expect this to turn out if it's not turning out well?
Right. Or if we're the learning experience designer, the learning experience architect, right, of this course, we can grab that module and we can look at those assumptions and say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to need these other two modules as well. Yeah. I'm going to grab one from over here and one from over here, and I'm going to sequence it stuff. So I'm going to make sure that I've done that, right? And then, that overlay of the connective tissue, now it flows nicely. But that doesn't mean, you have to get all of those modules from the same author, or,
Yep.
anything like that, right? You can, you can pick and choose where you get that info. It could be
Well,
an
and
external resource, right? Whatever.
100%. And this is what's I think where we're really in a really cool spot with some of this stuff. If we decide to loosely couple these things, me as the designer slash subject matter expert slash architect, person involved in developing the learning experience, I don't have to create everything.
Right.
If there's a really great YouTube video that explains this, why on God's green earth am I going to invest any time, energy, resources into producing some variant of that?
Right.
Now, I pick that resource and I have a very good reason for picking that resource, and maybe in the sidebar, like, teacher, hey, we expect this video should help the learner do X or explain XYZ, because inevitably if that resource were to break and go away, you want to be able to replace it with something fairly easily. But yeah, we don't have to make everything. Our real goal or gold in what we do as the architect is the connective tissue, right? We don't wire things up. We don't build the junction boxes. We don't paint the walls, but we are the ones who connect it all together within that blueprint at the very beginning.
Exactly. And it's a combination of creation and curation, right?
Yes.
If you can go out and curate some really great material and put that together into a great course, that's fine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's all about outcomes, right? And what the intent of the course is.
And I think too, right now, the ability to access information is obviously exponentially grows every single day. And while there's a pro there, it's awesome. Yes, great. There's also the con. Holy crap. What's actually good information? What makes sense for me where I'm at as a learner? And I think that's again where the instructor, coupled with the work of the course designer, instructional designer, learning experience designer, could provide potentially 3, 4, 5 resources, depending on where that learner is at when they come in into the material.
Right. Well, and I think, another thing that we talk about, and I think is important, especially with the explosion of all of this access to information that we have, we've talked about this, right? Your instructor and even your, learning experience architect, we're not the gatekeepers of knowledge anymore, right? Like we used to be. But I think one thing that's useful is making sure, especially if you're the learning experience architect, coming in with an opinion, right? This is an opinionated way of putting this stuff together, right? So when I create it or I curate it and I make those decisions, that I'm following some kind of arc, right? There's some kind of North Star that I'm following here. And it might not be the only North Star. It might not be the only map that you can have, but you got to put your stake in the ground and say, this is the way we're going to learn it now. Right. And there are other ways to do it, and that's fine. And we can discuss those after the course. But for now, this is an opinionated way to do this, and this is the way we're going to do it now. And you just got to buy in.
And and I know we've all had students who come into the class and want to think that they know better how to teach it than you.
Yep.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating.
It is. Yeah. But if you don't come with an opinion, right? If you as an instructional designer, if you come in with we're going to like all viewpoints are equal kind of thing, it becomes really mushy, right? Yeah. I mean, you're just like pushing on Jello. There's nothing solid there, right? There's nothing to compare and contrast. So I think you got to make sure, even though you run up against some, people with different opinions, I think you can explain that away. It's like, this isn't the only opinion. This is just our opinion now.
Well, I think though too, that goes into some part of the assumption portion of this, or the why portion of it. The why, if we can articulate why we're including this module or this piece now, that becomes part of our continuous improvement plan. Well, we ran this course, and hopefully if we're collecting enough data, we realize something was broken here, and we might go fix that based on looking at what the assumption was and how that impacted the outcome.
Right. I think that's another really important piece in the whole idea of responsive learning experience design, is the feedback loop from the boots on the ground
Yes.
in the classroom. And I think it needs to be built in. And I know you and I have talked
would agree
about this when
100%.
when I got into teaching, I took some classes at Kent State. They had this thing called a T form, right? Which was kind of your lesson plan, kind of your notes or whatever, but every single one of them had a thing at the end of like, what, and it was more kind of for your own personal lesson
Mhm.
planning kind of thing, for high school. But what worked well, what didn't work well, what was a hit, what wasn't a hit, what would I do again, what would I never try again. And as we scale, if your system, if your course has that thing built in, and then you have tens of instructors across different modalities and different places teaching this, now you get a really good set of feedback data to
Yeah.
just continuously improve it. So it's responsive in that sense as well.
Yeah. And even if it's, because I have the intent of, after every class, jotting down some notes. It might happen the first week, but never happens again, because like, it's
Right.
just, it's another thing at the end of teaching.
Right.
If you do it well, I'm going to argue an hour of teaching will tire you out.
Right.
Effective teaching. It may be as simple as something in the learning management system or personal learning environment, however we want to design it, that is as simple as the push button on the bathroom now.
Yep.
Like the green is good and yellow and red. Like,
Yep.
don't make it too intensive for people to provide feedback.
Yeah, maybe, like you said, maybe it's a series of a couple questions, and you hit 4 or 5 different radio buttons, and you're done.
Yeah. Because I think that's one of the things that, we've talked about before when collecting data. What are you going to do with the data? Don't just collect data for the sake of collecting data. Let's collect it with some intent. And again, some assumptions that we're going to try to test as part of this.
Right. And, the kind of things I had thought about this a little bit earlier today, that the same kind of thing is like, okay, maybe one of the questions is on timing. Too long, too short, just right.
Yeah.
Yep. What about the materials and examples? Spot on, off the mark, whatever. And it just, then we can kind of these, different questions about, and I think what we have to think about is we, kind of would, put together guidelines or whatever. What are the things as a learning experience designer? What kinds of things do we want to know from the instructor? And I think timing is one of them. The examples would be one of them. Discussion points. Did the, were the exercises useful? Whatever. So there's a lot of different things that, again, that gets back into good survey design, good question design, right? What do we want to know?
Yeah, and I think I like the I'm going to call it the Goldilocks spectrum, right? Or is it
exactly
too hot, too cold, or just right? I mean, that's anything more than that. I mean, I like Likert just because I do, but what is really, I think if we're looking, we're not necessarily, especially at the beginning of a design, we're not looking for nuance yet. We're still like doing some of the rough hewing.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I like that. And I think that is easy, right? At the end of because then at the end of every class, I got to hit 4 or 5 buttons and I'm done. I can do that.
Well, or it might even be this, Ward, if these lessons are chunked as I think that they might be for us, small enough to where you might even go through 3 lessons in a day, or in a boot camp model, you might go through 10 lessons in a day.
Absolutely.
Why isn't it just that response
should be at the end of each one? Yep.
And that's how you proceed, right? I mean, I think you want to give people an option to proceed without filling out the data, because you don't want forced data, because I think that is gross. But like, if you explain to them why that data matters, and if it's simple enough for them to proceed, it's like the instruction would be release class for a break, fill out these 3 things, and then now you go take a break too. Like,
yep. Well, and and I think the other thing we do on this, right, is set it up so those questions are, like we've done this. It's simple, right? Do you record attendance, or do you record absences? Well, absences are a lot easier.
Yeah.
There's right. So make it easy. So if I didn't do anything, the person was present. If I indicated that they were absent, then they were absent, right?
Yeah.
Same thing there is like, I'm going to answer these questions. I'm going to assume that if you didn't answer them, everything's fine.
The other thing too that might be kind of cool would, and again, this would have to wait until it was deployed, but I know sometimes you respond to surveys simply to see the results.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Again,
Right.
we're making some assumptions here that we can hopefully test when we actually start
Yeah, I
putting this thing
agree.
together
I
about
agree.
whether people are
But
going
I
to fill
think that
stuff
that's
out.
just another, there's so many different ways of so many different axes that responsiveness goes on, right?
Yeah.
And I think if we can hit all of them, then you have, to your point, you have some really excellent education that can scale.
Yeah, because I think where we falter in education right now is relying too much on multiple choice style questions to prove learning. And I
Yep.
think where we ask 100 multiple choice questions, we can probably get better information by asking 10 really, really, really good questions.
Yep.
Um, and that gives us better data to work with, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you want to go for quality of data, not quantity of data,
Yeah.
right? You got to ask really good questions. And if you don't have any more really good questions to ask, then don't ask. Right.
Yes, yes. It doesn't have to be 100 questions. It doesn't.
Right.
The
Exactly.
the software now will actually do the percentage calculation for you.
Yeah, exactly. It'll do the math for you. So
Yes.
yeah, so I mean, this is exciting. And I mean, I think that this is a little bit of this conversation that we just had is kind of the culmination of the conversations we've been having over the last 5 years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is a big, huge undertaking, but I think at some point there's two things that are going to happen after COVID, right? Potentially, things are going to go back to normal,
Yep.
whatever that is, depending on how long this lasts, and then things are going to incrementally change. I don't
Right.
think you're going to get academia to do anything drastic ever. I mean, what we're doing right now is drastic because of whatever, but I think when we come out of this, there are so many variables and things to consider with regards to academia that any of the changes that happen to better prepare us for a future situation like this um, will be slow rolling. So what I want to focus on for us, right, is how can we put this stuff together, have these conversations that are going to demonstrate the most value to
Yep.
the people that actually have to use them, right?
Right. And I think put them together in a way that, we don't want to make the mistake of, well, you're either all in with this or you're all
Yeah.
out. The ability to pick and choose and make your course 10% better than it was before, or 30% better than it was before, depending on what you can do, what your bandwidth is, what you want to try, your willingness to experiment, all the way up to, sure, you can implement all of it, but just having the ability to do pieces and parts in a way that allow people to, kind of evolve, right, a little bit.
Yeah, because I know I've heard from faculty who've tried to employ a flipped classroom or an active classroom model. They do it for the entire semester, the entire course,
Right.
and it's just hard. I mean,
Yeah.
so maybe if it is just one module, like I'm gonna argue that every course going forward should have every traditional 16, 15 week course should have 1 week where it's done remotely
Yeah. Well,
just to
and
prepare
I'm going to
people.
start putting that into our corporate training as well. We get a lot. I mean, the corporations really, really prize the in-person immersive model, right? Because, and there are a lot of great things with it, right?
Yeah.
You can simulate a work environment. It's like showing up to the office every day. There's a lot of different things with that. But I think I'm going to put forth that in the same way, because of the changing nature of work, every one of those courses should have a week where you're working completely remote.
100%. But think about it too, right? I think maybe some of the face-to-face stuff and why people like that is because of the socialization you get going to dinner after or bar
Yeah,
after
yeah, yeah,
these
yeah.
conventions, right? There's that
Absolutely.
social component that people like, and I think we can make that work in this type of environment.
I
And
agree.
this, like, break people out into small groups, do some things that are specifically focused on socialization. And instead of having, we could have 20 people in here, right?
Yeah.
and we could have 100 people in here, and we could have everybody go through and, hi, I'm Mike, I do this, blah 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 blah, and while the other 99 people are checking their Facebooks, right?
Right.
Use the small group or the breakout feature here. Put people into small groups. Do stuff like that. Like, it's easier to break 100 people into small groups in this than it is in a physical environment.
Yeah, because you don't have to
100%,
get up and
right?
move tables, right? Absolutely.
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
can use those same techniques, right? You know, hey, we're
Mhm.
gonna socialize. We're gonna socialize everybody. You're not gonna meet all 100 people, but we're gonna divide you up into 10 groups of 10, and you guys are gonna come up, and each group is gonna report back what's the most interesting thing you learned about the 10 people in your group. Boom.
Yeah.
And we're gonna take 10 minutes to do it.
Yep.
So yeah,
100%.
I mean, all of those kinds of things. So yeah, this is exciting. I mean, I think there's a great opportunity, and if we can put together things that allow people to incrementally improve and adopt pieces and parts, and you know, get better over time, you know, I think that'll be a win.
We can change 1 hour of one class and make it better. We'll have
There
succeeded,
you
right?
go. Yep, right on.
Cool.
Exactly. So
So anything else? Are you cool to wrap up? Because
I'm
it's a
good to
long,
wrap up. I think we
a
I
long
think we
day in the
covered it all.
trenches. It's a long
Absolutely.
day in the trenches right now.
All right, man. Sounds good. I'll
Awesome.
catch you out tomorrow.
Take care, man.
All right.